The Paris Agreement is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, on climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finance, signed in 2016. The agreement's language was negotiated by representatives of 196 state parties at the 21st Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC in Le Bourget, near Paris, France, and adopted by consensus on 12 December 2015. As of March 2021, 191 members of the UNFCCC are parties to the agreement. Of the 6 UNFCCC member states which have not ratified the agreement, the only major emitters are Iran, Iraq and Turkey. Though Iraq's president has approved that country's accession, the United States withdrew from the agreement in 2020, but rejoined in 2021. The Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal is to keep the rise in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, recognizing that this would substantially reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. This should be done by reducing emissions as soon as possible, in order to achieve a balance between anthropogenic emissions by sources and removals by sinks of greenhouse gases in the second half of the 21st century. It also aims to increase the ability of parties to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change and make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. Under the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan, and regularly report on the contribution that it undertakes to mitigate global warming. No mechanism forces a country to set a specific emissions target by a specific date, but each target should go beyond previously set targets. In contrast to the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, the distinction between developed and developing countries is blurred, so that the latter also have to submit plans for emission reductions. The Paris Agreement was opened for signature on the 22nd of April 2016 at a ceremony in New York. After the European Union ratified the agreement in October 2016, there were enough countries that had ratified the agreement that produce enough of the world's greenhouse gases for the agreement to enter into force. The agreement went into effect on the 4th of November 2016. The Kyoto Protocol, adopted in 1997, regulated greenhouse gas reductions for a limited set of countries from 2008 to 2012. The protocol was extended until 2020 with the Doha Amendment in 2012. The United States decided not to ratify the protocol, mainly because of its legally binding nature. This, and distributional conflict, led to failures of subsequent international climate negotiations. The 2009 round of negotiations were intended to produce a successor Treaty of Kyoto. But the resulting Copenhagen Accord was not legally binding and did not get adopted universally. The accord did lay the framework for bottom-up approach of what would become the Paris Agreement. Under the leadership of UNFCCC Executive Secretary Christiana Figueres, negotiation regained momentum after Copenhagen's failure. During the 2011 United Nations Climate Change Conference, the Durban Platform was established with the aim to negotiate a legal instrument governing climate change mitigation measures from 2020. The resulting agreement was to be adopted in 2015. At the conclusion of COP21, on the 12th of December 2015, the final wording of the Paris Agreement was adopted by consensus by all of the 195 UNFCCC participating member states and the European Union to reduce emissions as part of the method for reducing greenhouse gas. In the 12-page agreement, the members promised to reduce their carbon output as soon as possible, and to do their best to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. The Paris Agreement was open for signature by states and regional economic integration organizations that are parties to the UNFCCC if 55 countries that produce at least 55% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions ratify the treaty. By acceptance, approval or accession, with ratification by the European Union, the agreement obtained enough parties to enter into effect on the 4th of November 2016. Both the EU and its member states are individually responsible for ratifying the Paris Agreement. A strong preference was reported that the EU and its 28 member states deposit their instruments of ratification at the same time to ensure that neither the EU nor its member states engage themselves to fulfilling obligations that strictly belong to the other. And there were fears that disagreement over each individual member state's share of the EU-wide reduction target, as well as Britain's vote to leave the EU, might delay the Paris Pact. However, the EU deposited its instruments of ratification on the 5th of October 2016. Along with several individual EU member states, the EU and 190 states have ratified or acceded to the agreement, including China and India, the countries with the first and third largest CO2 emissions among UNFCCC members.